Hello, everybody. Welcome to this live stream. I am joined here by Jacob Sleece. We're going to be joined by the rest of the legislative team here in just a minute, as well as Howard Stutz. There is Tabitha joining in. So hopefully you're seeing us. I am getting some echoing, but I think that's because I have the YouTube live stream open. There we go. No more echoing for me. Hello, Howard. How's it going?
I'm here. Good morning.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our live stream. Sean, Tabitha, Jacob, Howard, you guys have all been working very hard on reporting on the A's, the special session, and everything going on at the legislature. I'm Joey Lovato, the multimedia editor here at the Nevada Independent. Tabitha, Jacob, Sean, and I are all in the same room. So if you hear some echoing, we're playing like a little bit of a mute, I don't know, ping pong. Howard is in Vegas. And so I just wanted to welcome everybody. There's been a lot going on. So to start off, let's start with you, Jacob, just explaining what you guys have been covering specifically. You've all kind of covered different aspects of this, depending on what your expertise are.
For sure. I guess just to give everyone an overlay of what we've been watching here, right? I think Howard's been tracking rumblings about the A's moving to Vegas for, well over a year, right? But I think if we're looking at the legislative session, and this is a political process that really starts in February, right, when I think we saw the building of a pretty substantial lobbying team in Carson City. And then from then on, it was a lot of backroom dealing and trying to figure out exactly what the deal would look like. Certainly, I can think of multiple stories from Howard, right, where we were bouncing from site to site in Las Vegas. Where on the Strip would it be? Would it be on the Strip? People at the Rio hoping it wouldn't be, right? And then finally, in late May, Tabitha's reporting coming in, right, about a deal coming through, about a bill coming, and then that falling through right at the end of the session, and then taking us through the special session into today. So I think if that's the through line. I mean, even in the last week, there's been so much that we didn't see in the public eye, and only so much that's become clear now in the past couple of days. So I think we'll probably get right into that.
Sean, let's jump over to you. But before we do that, I wanted to let the audience know that if you're watching on YouTube, you can drop questions in the chat, and we will be fielding a lot of questions from you guys mostly. If you see me looking away, it's because I'm checking YouTube comments. So, all right, Sean, let's go to you next.
Yeah, I think to really hammer it home, Tabitha and Howard have been the ones who have been all over this. This is a national story that a lot of, national sports outlets like ESPN and The Athletic have been looking at. And Howard and Tabitha were the ones that were constantly breaking the news about, binding agreements for stadium sites and, kind of the twists and turns there. And we were the first ones that had our hands on the bill language, kind of outlining what exactly would this deal be. I'd say I probably have the best understanding of state budgeting and tax credits and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I have come in and supplemented this coverage, is just kind of through, understanding the workings of the public money aspect of this and kind of the financials of it. And certainly Howard has also taken the aspect of the business angle. He looked into the private financing, the deals with land in and around the Las Vegas Strip, well established gaming sources that Howard has been able to go to and kind of lay out what's happening on the ground in Vegas, while we up here in Carson City have covered the lawmaking and policy aspect of it.
All right, and let's hear from you, Tabitha, now.
I don't know if I have too much to add to what Jacob and Sean just said, other than I think that, this is a team effort. And one of the things that makes the Indy really special is the way that we can all kind of combine our different skill sets, knowledge bases to really formulate the reporting that you saw during this process.
Cool. And then we'll end with Howard down in Vegas.
Yeah, thanks. And it's been a crazy process. I mean, as the team said, I mean, they've been looking at this for 2 years. The A's have been bouncing around. They had sites up. There were sites up in Summerlin, sites in Henderson, but they seemed to focus on the Strip. But the most bizarre thing was that they announced on April 19th and 20th that they're going to this 49-acre site on the old Wild Wild West over on Tropicana, just west of Interstate 15. And what was it, Tabitha? Like a week, 2 weeks later, they said, "Oh, we're going over to the Tropicana now," and completely. The thing was, the one on the west side of the I-15 was 49 acres, and they talked about an entertainment district, this village built around with restaurants and shopping and retail. Then the next thing you know is they're going over to a 9-acre site. There's no entertainment district, but what it did was it brought down the cost, the public money ask. Originally, they were asking for $500 million in public money, and that seemed to really, it seemed that didn't seem to go. That went over like a lead balloon, apparently, and then it came down to about $380 million is what the bill ended up saying. And there's what was interesting, what the team reported in the last couple of days in these amendments was the bill was originally site agnostic. So if the Tropicana agreement fell apart for some reason, could move it to another site. Not anymore. What was added into the bill was it's on the Tropicana site now. So that's really kind of tied this down, and we'll see how this moves forward now in the next few months, because they've got to get development agreement. They've got to get all these different components have got to come together.
One thing that I do want to say, Joey, before we kind of launch in is I think that there's been I'd like to clarify how we do sourcing at the Indy. I think that what people need to know is when we're talking about sourcing here, we're talking 2-3 sources, maybe even more. Like when I first started hearing rumblings of a formal deal, I went to the editors and I said, "Hey, I don't know if this is anything, but we should I can start calling some folks." And so that night, I remember texting Howard. I remember we were in communication. We were confirming things or trying to get confirmation on the outlines of the deal, that $500 million public ask. So when we're talking about the backing of our reporting, it's really noteworthy that we had multiple sources, and probably, Howard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in most instances, we probably had 4 or 5 sources backing up the reporting that we were doing.
Yeah, as Tab said, we had sources when we confirmed it that night. We had sources completely separate from that wouldn't even have spoken to each other's sources. So it was we were sure of what we had, and we were rushing to get this out. And it was it's been a team effort from the get-go on this. From when we first found out that the A's had hired 18, 20 lobbyists. Pretty much half the lot, 3/4 of the lobbying corps in Carson City were working for the A's. That was a sign that, okay, something's going forward. And I just think, honestly, what we reported that in February, it didn't get till April till we finally saw a deal, and then May until we saw a bill. So I think this really dragged on a lot slower than I think a lot of us expected it would.
And we've got a lot of questions pouring in here, but I guess I just wanted to mention right before, Tabitha and Howard both mentioned all the sourcing that we do here at the Nevada Independent, but also we are a nonprofit. We run off of donations from people like you. So if you would like to donate, you can find that on the nevadaindependent.com. There's a big donate button on the top of the website. That helps us do the reporting that we have done. And so with that, I'm going to get into some of the reader questions we've got here. The first one is from David Figler, and he asks, what are the enforcement mechanisms for the, quote, greatest community benefits package in history? Well, he's asking about the enforcement mechanisms for the community benefits package. So we'll start there.
So I can kind of take that one if you want, Joey. So originally, one of the big complaints from lawmakers is that there wasn't enforcement for this community benefits agreement, that there was kind of vague language. What we saw with the amendment that came out of the Senate, that was eventually what passed out of the Assembly and is now on its way to the governor's desk, was an amendment that stipulated that as part of the 7-member base oversight board, the Las Vegas Stadium Authority Board would be required to appoint a director to monitor the team's compliance with the community's benefits agreement. That is stipulated within the amendment that came out of the Assembly, saying that person had to be independent, not connected to the team, and I think have lived in Vegas for 5 years. Now, underneath that proposed benefits agreement in the bill, it outlines that if the team fails to comply with the agreement, the team has to explain their reasons for non-compliance. And they'd also have to hire one or multiple subject matter experts to prepare how we're going to address that non-compliance. If the team fails to comply with that agreement, the stadium authority would then have the ability to take corrective action, including pursuing legal action. That is what the oversight outlined in the bill is.
And I also just want to ask, what is a community benefits package for those who don't know?
Well, a community benefits agreement is basically saying that if you have a developer or a team or something that is receiving public financing, it is a commitment saying, here is what we will do to benefit the community that we find ourselves in, right? In this case, the team has agreed to, prior to the construction of the stadium, give $500,000 a year and either monetary or in-kind contributions. When we're talking about in-kind contributions, that could be donations of ticket sales, it could be volunteering. There's a lot of ways to interpret that. Once the stadium is constructed, they've committed to doing $2 million a year. Originally, it was $1.5 million, but state lawmakers said we want $2 million. There's also some other parts of that agreement, and it's not formalized yet. No one has signed anything. It's a proposed community benefits agreement. I think the reporting, if you look on our website, you can see what the most recent draft of that is, but there's inclusions in there of living wages. There's an inclusion of a stipulation the team has a fund for workers who may be facing financial hardship and say paying rent or something like that, as well as specifying that the team works with the Nevada Institution of Higher Education.
And I just want to jump in and add to that, there's a lot more teeth and a lot more strict requirements in this community benefits agreement than the one that the Raiders signed and that was put into law for the Allegiant Stadium deal. I think lawmakers really were conscious of that deal, and they wanted to put more of those requirements into law with this particular community benefits agreement. Like Tabs mentioned, with the $2 million a year investment, that's in law now. I mean, once Governor Lombardo signs the bill, that will be in law. That's a part of this legislation, as well as, diversity requirements for hiring. So there's a lot more that's being placed into law to make sure that compliance happens versus leaving it up for a term sheet that, at this point is out of lawmakers' hands. It's going to be decided between the team and the Las Vegas Stadium Authority.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the sources of public funding there? So whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, I can enumerate that, Joey. So we're talking, that's the number floating around. $380 million is what is the cap on public funding in the bill. The bulk of that, $180 million, is going to come from transferable tax credits issued by the state. And so transferable tax credits, basically, they would be issued to the team, and then the team could sell those credits to other companies like gaming businesses like MGM, for example, for cash. Now, those aren't normally sold at a 1-to-1 ratio. I, as the A's, for example, could sell 10 million in credits for 9 million in cash. That's kind of just an example of what that could look like. So they're not really getting the full benefit of $180 million, even though they're getting that much in transferable tax credits. The other big portion of this is bonds issued by Clark County. This is common in infrastructure projects and development, where basically the county is expected to issue about $120 million in bonds. It could ultimately be higher than that, kind of approaching even 150, 175, but we're hearing 120 as the number. And repaying those bonds is going to depend on what the interest rates are when they're actually issued. Assuming everything goes to plan, that will probably be happening, I assume, sometime next year. And so that's kind of the bulk of it. There's also a $25 million credit that the county would be required to issue, basically for addressing infrastructure needs around the stadium. I think that would kind of go to things like traffic flows, making sure it's easy to access the stadium and actually get in and out, because, like we said, this is the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Tropicana. This is a very busy traffic location. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but certainly there's money there to address the infrastructure needs. And I think there's also a requirement on the team itself to help address those infrastructure needs. And finally, there's also a portion, a state line of credit of $14 million through the State Infrastructure Bank. This basically is to kind of back up the county bonds and just provide an extra layer of safety with that.
All right. Well, along the same lines as the the enforcement mechanism are there ways to track the success and efficiency and deliverables of the community benefits agreement?
So one of the things that is going to be required is an annual accountability and progress report that will be submitted to the governor and the legislature, as well as state and other local officials. I believe it's also going to be submitted to that 7-member stadium authority board as part of all of this. So that's one way that progress is being tracked. Also, all of these meetings for the stadium authority board are supposed to be subject to open meeting law, which means that you as a citizen can request these documents, you can attend the meetings, you can kind of track the progress as well. And Howard, maybe I am speaking for you, but I am absolutely certain that the Nevada Independent will continue following this story. And I can have Howard maybe talk more about that if he wants.
Oh yeah, I'm planning on it. And as Tab said, the stadium authority, they do meet publicly. It's chaired by Steve Hill, the chairman of the CEO of the LBCBA. They've met publicly during, with the Raiders. They still do, and so obviously now they're going to be added on with with these A's deals. So something we will follow. add to the list. It's it'll be fascinating to see some of the discussions, negotiations on this. How this community benefits package is much different from the Raiders, and I think maybe they've learned a lesson from the Raiders package. I mean, that was the first time it was done. This is all the second time we've seen this type of thing come through the legislature in a special session for a stadium. It's what happened with Allegiant Stadium, albeit they're different they're very different the way it was done. I mean, Allegiant was room taxes and $750 million in room taxes that was agreed to by the casino industry. And this was a lot different funding. And also with Allegiant, I want to point out quickly that the Raiders were a little more were open about where their private money was coming from. Initially, $650 million from the Las Vegas Sands and the late Sheldon Adelson, who pulled out of the deal later on. But they also were, $500 million from the Raiders, and they were able to come up with, they talked about the bank financing that they were getting. The A's, which are going to be what, 75%, more than 75% of this project, more than at least $1.1 billion, I guess, is the term they used. We don't know where it's all coming from. And that's the biggest question that's out there. And I think that's going to have to be answered at some point here as this goes forward.
And just to add to that money is going to have to come from a team owner who has been very reluctant to spend on his team. The A's have consistently had one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. I believe Howard has heard, some information that it could come from Goldman Sachs, some private banking financing, but nothing solidified or public at this point.
Right, and that's true. And the thing is Sean just made a good point. In all the hearings that have been in front of the legislature, it was Jeremy Aguero and Steve Hill. The A's were not there at the first hearing, the 6-hour marathon that we Tabs and I sat through, and to the point where the power on our laptops ran out. They weren't there. And 2 days later, we caught Dave Cavill, the president of the A's, and John Fisher, the owner, walking through the halls of the legislature to meet with lawmakers. That's all we've seen of John Fisher. Dave Cavill was there during the hearing in front of the Senate this past week or last week. They're all blending together now. It's very different. The A's were very out front. I should say, the Raiders were very, very out front in being public with, what they wanted, what they were seeking. The A's have been very silent. So that's some questions they're going to have to respond to now. They got to be a lot more public in the next few months.
One other thing that I wanted to note is, for those who are interested in kind of the comparison of the community benefits agreement with the Raiders deal and with this deal, you should really go on our website and check out Noelle Sims' reporting. She did a beautiful infographic kind of outlining the different parts of this that she designed herself. And I highly recommend just kind of poring over that if you're interested in a comparison of those two things.
Well, we've got a question from inside the Indy. One of our own is asking, if we could talk about the fact that we've been talking about the A's, but they're not actually mentioned in the bill by name. Is that normal? Did we see that with the Raiders bill, or why are they not mentioned and what's going on there? Whoever wants to.
That was the only thing that didn't change, I guess, from the beginning. It was a Major League Baseball team, and the site was a agnostic site. So I'm not real sure why the A's weren't mentioned in this. Maybe the team up north knows, but there's no other teams looking to move to Las Vegas. I can tell you that right now. And and the question, this is the only team that's been out here looking to possibly coming here.
Yeah, we all have this understanding that it's for the A's. I think it's certainly just common, if you're putting this into state law, to not be naming a specific company versus kind of leaving that open for just understanding what the real world dynamics are of this, but just kind of putting the bones of it into law. And for example, if this did fall through, and Las Vegas is still looking to just attract a Major League Baseball team, whether it be another team or through expansion, then a similar deal is still on the table for attracting that. But ultimately, we know this is about the A's, and that's what this bill is for.
Well, and someone correct me, but the Raiders deal also didn't name the Raiders, right? Like this is not new. This is something that we've seen with other teams in precedence. And I think it's because we are not, the state is not specifying for a corporation, for a company, for an organization. It is setting up the structure to allow a team, company, or whatever the group is to invest in the way that they've outlined. And obviously, like Sean, Jacob, Howard have all kind of pointed out, yes, this is for the Oakland A's. But if for some reason, some other baseball team theoretically owned the site on the Tropicana and we're going to build this baseball stadium, they could be implemented. That could be implemented through this bill. But yeah.
And this is common just for economic development generally. Even outside of attracting sports teams, I'm not going to delve into the history of Tesla and Faraday in Northern Nevada, but this is just how it works, I think, in the game, in the world of economic incentives.
Well, I'm seeing a ton of different questions that are all kind of along the same theme here. So I'm going to kind of sum these up and see if I can ask it. But basically, what is the benefit of Allegiant Stadium and the return on investment there? And then, what are the benefits going to be from this new stadium?
Are you talking the economic benefit of it? Or, the Allegiant Stadium has been the most successful stadium of its size in the last 2 years. And that's not just because of the Raiders. It's only 9 Raiders games a season, and definitely not because of UNLV football, but it's because of the concerts, the different events it's brought in. Now you're going to see, we're going to see the Super Bowl there in February. We're going to see the NCAA Final Four in 2028. They have host college football non-conference games. There's a huge soccer tournament going on starting tonight and Sunday, I guess, at the stadium over the USA and Mexico and a bunch of international teams, and it's sold out. So that's been the talk about the benefit of Allegiant Stadium, what it's brought to the town in terms of tourism. And that's been the argument, and that's been one of the debates that, as you guys, the team all saw, about the A's. You're talking about 82 Major League Baseball games a year, and that at a 30,000 seat stadium. And they were talking about, I think, roughly 28,000 a game that they would attract. I don't know if the Detroit Tigers and the Las Vegas A's in the middle of August is going to attract 28,000, but my friends from Detroit will be happy for saying that. But this is a very different type of stadium and structure, and the argument is being made also is Las Vegas did not have a stadium the size of Allegiant Stadium when it was built. We have a lot of venues here that are T-Mobile, as we found out, could seat 19,000 for a hockey game the other night. But they, routinely 18,000 for hockey games. They have boxing, they have basketball. We have the Orleans Arena. We have all these different arenas. We don't have a venue that's 30,000 seats. do we need one that's 30,000 seats? That's the argument that a lot of the proponents were making in the last few weeks. So, that's where this kind of sits right now. And as far as the benefits, we'll see what other events, if this does happen, what they will bring in.
I do want to point out, though, that in the presentations we got from Jeremy Aguero and Steve Hill during these legislative hearings, they were saying that it was only going to be about 14 events that were not baseball games. The bulk of what this stadium would bring are those baseball games. And when you look at the sort of like visitorship projections, you may have heard the word non-incremental visitors, right? Sort of people who would not have come to Las Vegas, but for whatever event there's going to be at the stadium. They're really looking at those 82 baseball games as the main driver of traffic. And there's really not a good comparison. Like Howard said, Allegiant is much bigger, right? It'd be twice as big as this stadium. It's 3 times as big as T-Mobile Arena. You look at hockey games, right? That's half as many home games as a baseball season, and they're only filling, an average of 17,000 seats every time. So it's like, looking at these projections, it's very difficult to say whether or not this is going to pan out, because if it does, by percentages, this will be the most full baseball stadium. If it says what they say it's going to do, it will be the most full by percentage in the entire league.
And that's with it being the lowest capacity stadium in all of the major leagues. I think right now the lowest is around 34, 35,000. A's are looking at a 30,000 seat stadium because they are building the stadium to meet the market, has kind of been the phrase we've heard. And that remains to be seen. Just to kind of circle back on the economics of this and to kind of take a step back, I've spoken with sports economists about this, and they've pointed me to the litany of research on the topic that basically shows building a sports stadium with public money is not a good investment of public dollars. There is little to no real economic benefit. But the argument from the proponents is, well, Las Vegas is different. It warps the math because of our tourism-driven economy. And I think that remains to be seen. Yes, T-Mobile has been very successful. Allegiant has been very successful, but it's hard to make those judgments about a stadium with not very much research, and with them only being around for a few years. For very many years, Las Vegas was the largest national market without a major professional, league team, top sporting team. And now it's kind of coming like a fire with the Golden Knights and the Raiders and the A's, and NBA is potentially on the horizon. We have the WNBA moving here in the last few years. So, Vegas certainly could buck the math and be different from other cities, but what the research shows is that investing public dollars in stadiums is just not a good, sound economic decision, and a good use of public dollars. But we will see if the proponents of this stadium are right.
We've got a lot of questions pouring in, so I'm going to try and get through these a little quicker. But Al asks, do we have an idea of when the governor will sign the bill and officially make it law?
We heard. Well, I'm sorry, Tabs. I haven't heard any more today. We heard last night it will be in a few days. So I thought it might be tomorrow, but now it's thinking it might be next week. I do know that it's been said the governor's going to sign in Las Vegas, which seems to make sense. I think he's probably wants to avoid the parade tomorrow on Saturday he probably wants to attend it, but he wants to avoid, the parade for the Golden Knights, and that's going to go down the strip. So I think maybe early next week, but I think he's got to a week from Friday, right, to get it signed. But unless something really weird happens, I can't imagine him not signing the bill.
We've got a question from Elliot King, which is, there's no ballpark with a retractable roof that will fit on 9 acres. Is this leverage for the A's to stay in Oakland?
I mean, go ahead, Sean, go ahead. Yeah.
Like we said before, this is a 30,000 seat stadium. It's going to be the smallest ballpark in the major leagues. We've certainly reversed the trend from the 90s, and I think even before that, of building as many seats as possible, just trying to fill as many seats. Really the way that recent stadiums have been shifting, like, Allegiant is one of the smaller NFL stadiums in terms of capacity, I think, at least certainly at the cost it was built of, I think somewhere in the range of $2 billion. And so what we're seeing is kind of higher quality, smaller capacity stadiums being built in professional leagues. And so I think there is a possibility it's built on 9 acres. The renderings that we've seen of the ballpark are not complete. So we'll see how this progresses. But to say that it's a negotiation tactic to stay in Oakland, I think, the A's would have to address that. But certainly, I think all the signs point to their desire to relocate from Oakland and move to Las Vegas.
Yeah, we've all seen, people sending us the schematics for other ballparks, and it's been all over in social media. The A's did say that there's they are taking the 9 acres, but then there's this plaza, the shared space they're talking about. Nobody really knows for sure. The problem was the renderings that came out the same day that the bill language dropped. That the bill language dropped that morning, and later that morning they put out the rendering. It's almost like a Dodge. Oh, look, pretty pictures. Come see them. It really, the first thing I looked at it, and it said this is not taking up 9 acres. It's taking up the entire 35, 36 acres. And where's the Tropicana in this whole thing? So the renderings, as Sean said, they're not complete. The designs are not complete. That's going to be, there's a lot that still has to be done on their part, on the Oakland A's part on this. This is a big step, but with the bill getting through, but there's a lot of work to be done. And we don't know exact schematic what this stadium's going to look like. There's a lot of talk about they made this big point about how home plate will face the west, or the south, or toward this kind of the west, and so they have a view of the strip. Well, that puts the setting sun at 7 p.m. right in the batter's eyes. You're not allowed to do that in baseball. They don't. There's no parks. There was a park in Bakersfield, California. It was the last one that had where the sun comes into the batter's eyes. That's not how it's done. So the alignment of the stadium seems to be off right now. So there's, like I said, there's just a lot of questions on that. Will it fit on 9 acres? That's a small part of it.
And there is nothing limiting the ballpark to 9 acres. Yes, that's what the A's have said, and that's kind of been the discussion in real terms. But in the legislation, the only limitation is that it's at that plot on the southeast corner of Trop and Las Vegas Boulevard. So in theory, it could take up more than the 9 acres, but that's not anything that we've heard.
And I'll point out what Sean said. The Bally's Corporation, which operates the Tropicanas, and they're the one, they lease the site from Gaming and Leisure Properties. They're the one, Bally's is the one that said we're giving the A's 9 acres. They have declined comment for the last 3 weeks after initially announcing, they have the deal with the A's to put the stadium there. They've declined comment. I've asked many, many times to try to, what does Bally's think of what's going on with the legislature? What do they think of all this discussion? They've just declined comments. So, maybe we'll learn more now in the next few weeks.
Well, we were speaking about other baseball stadiums, and I have a quick question actually about the other baseball stadium that's in the Las Vegas area, which is the Aviators ballpark. The Aviators are the AAA team in Las Vegas. How big is the Aviators ballpark? Do you know, Howard?
Sorry. No.
Oh no, now you're muted. Oh no, Howard, you're muted. It's the fun of a Zoom.
Now I'm mute. Am I now? Am I fine? There we are. Sorry. Okay. Aviator Stadium is 10,000 seats, and it was only built a few years ago. They actually got public money, believe it or not. It was actually a naming right from the LVCVA to put Las Vegas ballpark. So it's, it could be configured. Maybe I've looked around at it. You could probably add a couple thousand seats somehow, temporary. I'm not real sure, but we don't know yet. That's going to be a decision of Major League Baseball. Will decide if the A's are going to leave Oakland. One, will they play in Oakland next year? They do have a contract that ties them to the stadium till the end of 2024. And where would they play after that? Would they play it at the Aviators ballpark? Would they play in other places around Vegas? They go to Major League Baseball will decide where the A's will go. But Las Vegas ballpark could be one of them. And they also were quick to point out that the Las Vegas Aviators will remain there, which is good. And they want to keep their they want to keep the AAA franchise in Las Vegas, which is a good idea.
And Steve Hill even mentioned the possibility of the A's playing some games in Reno during that interim period. Could that have been to appease Northern Nevada lawmakers? Potentially, but that was thrown out as an idea.
I mean, as a Northern Nevada resident, the A's are going to be further from me down in Las Vegas than they are right now up in Oakland. So I think that was a big concern that we heard from lawmakers during the session is what does the North get, right? I think Assemblyman PK O'Neill said, don't forget the North in all of these discussions. And that was partly why we saw some of the changes, I think, in the community benefits agreement as well.
Nevada is more than just Las Vegas, for those of you who forget sometimes. I have another question here from an anonymous user who just asks, can Fisher, the owner of the A's, can they change their mind and actually not come here? Do the A's have an opportunity to just say, you know what, never mind, we've decided we don't want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they could. I mean, that's been one of the talks. Is this a negotiating ploy? I think we kind of brought this up earlier. Are they still looking to stay in Oakland? They're trying to get on the site at the Port of Oakland, the Howard Terminal. It was right on the waterfront. I've seen renderings of the site. I mean, it's a big project. It's also only 35,000 seats. So could this be who knows? We don't know. I mean, we'll know more. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff that has to still be negotiated in this with the Stadium Authority and then moving forward, with the development. So who knows?
We got a question from Rob here, which is, do you think that most residents of Nevada were even aware that this was being voted on? And if so, how much will it affect them?
I think that a lot of people don't really pay attention to the legislative process. I think that people that are fans of the Oakland A's were very invested in this. I mean, I can tell you that all of us on this Zoom call received numerous emails from folks. I think that there's a bit of a civic engagement issue. I mean, I could spend hours talking about that. But to keep it short, no, I don't know that everyone was involved. I mean, I think that a lot of people sort of put a lot of trust in lawmakers when they're evaluating deals like this. And as for the effect on the state, I think in large part, it sort of remains to be seen. And Sean might be a better person to talk about this, but broadly speaking, it's not like the state is just handing over $380 million to the team. Theoretically, that will be repaid. You can kind of see the process of that in an infographic that we actually published today. But it is, I mean, we are handing out, there's tax credits, there's bonding that's happening. And one of the lawmakers on the floor of the assembly pointed out that this is eating into some of the money that could theoretically go to like social services or other things. So that's all in play. I don't know the exact effect on the state yet, because A, I don't have a crystal ball, and B, nothing has been signed. Money has not yet been granted. There's lots of things that need to happen, but I do think that we need to realize that this is $380 million we're talking about.
I did want to bring something up, though, because I've seen it floating around online, right, that like this somehow took away money from something. And I think that's an argument that some lawmakers made, right, that, is this money that we could have appropriated somewhere else? People who want the stadium will argue, right, that this is not money that's going to come unless you build the stadium. I think we heard Jeremy Aguero make that argument specifically. But like Nevada's education rankings will get thrown around when we start talking about this stuff. And I just want to like make clear that this special session happened after a regular session that was almost completely built around the fact that the state was working with the largest budget it's ever had. We saw record tax revenues sort of drive a massive spending increase across a bunch of sectors, but specifically in education. So I just wanted to like dispel the notion that lawmakers aren't also interested in doing that. And I think we even saw, right, one speech from Assemblywoman Shannon Bilbray-Axelrod, who chairs the Assembly Education Committee, right? We funded education, but we can't keep doing it without new revenues. Therefore, we should do this, right? That's one argument. But we also heard on the Senate side, right? Like, well, if we're willing to give $380 million away like this, why not spend even more? So it's not something that the legislators aren't thinking about, but I had seen that on Twitter and I just wanted to throw that out there.
And just to add to this conversation about the statewide impact, right? So this is $180 million from the state that could otherwise go to other services. I think Senator Dallas Harris brought up this question of opportunity cost. I think the people who are backing this bill certainly think it is the best use of these dollars. The bill originally came on behalf of the governor's office. During that initial hearing, Governor Joe Lombardo's chief of staff, Ben Kiekefer, said, we think this is ultimately going to be a positive ROI for the state's general fund. So yes, kind of over the course of the years of construction and opening, the state is going to be issuing these $180 million in credits, which is basically reducing the amount of money by $180 million that the state can spend on other things. But eventually the argument is that revenues from the stadium are going to produce more for the state than what the state has put in. Also, just to kind of hit on the financing of this again, the $380 million, really the tax credits and the bonds, or most of the tax credits anyways, are going to be repaid by the stadium itself. Tabs mentioned the waterfall a little bit ago. And so basically what's going to happen is whenever they buy the construction materials to build the stadium, whenever they pay those payroll taxes on the wages paid to construction workers who build the stadium, the taxes on the wages paid to the people who operate the stadium, and the sales tax you pay on a hat you buy at the stadium, all of that money is going to be collected in this stadium district and is going to be used to pay off the bonds. It's going to be used to pay off a portion of the tax credits. Eventually, it might even go to help support a low-income housing fund in Clark County, although potentially that could be many years down the line when that really happens. And there are also some mechanisms in place to make sure that if those tax revenues are not producing enough dollars to make the bond payments, there are years of reserves, there's cash coverage, there's a state line of credit that all can be leaned upon to meet those bond payments before the stadium would have to really underperform for several years on end to reach the point where county general fund dollars would be needed to meet the bond payments. And only really then are you kind of entering the danger zone of, kind of what are the taxpayers on the hook for? Because in theory, the stadium is supposed to pay for itself over its lifetime.
But Sean made a good point, and you guys reported this yesterday in the amendment. They wrote into one of the amendments that it's only the stadium that is in this special tax district, because the Tropicana is going to be demolished as part of the project. And then Bally's is eventually going to rebuild something there, another hotel, casino, or something of that sort. That hotel, casino, everything involved with that will not be in the tax district. And I think that was a very important point they got into the bill that got out there, because it's just the stadium that's got to cover that $380 million. You're not gonna get a hotel casino in there that's gonna help cover it and get a bunch of tax breaks, So I thought that was a really key point.
And just real quick, that is a contrast to the Raiders deal, right? Where that was $750 million basically paid by a new tax, an increase of the room tax, right? And that sort of stadium district is almost all of Las Vegas, right? So in here, it really is just the site, and the difference mattered politically because they only needed a simple majority because it wasn't a tax increase, the A's deal, whereas the Raiders deal was. And so they needed 2/3. And so that's why I think we saw this in particular was a less popular bill in the legislature than the Raiders deal. And I think a lot of it had to come down to a lot more lawmakers were sort of allowed to protest vote and say they didn't want to do it.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention just one other, part of the public financing aspect of this. The stadium is going to be exempt from property taxes. Yes, it will be owned by the stadium authority, by the public technically, but that's going to be property taxes not being paid on a very valuable piece of real estate. That's going to be over the lifetime of the stadium, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes that will not be going to the state and the county. Versus, say, if another, mega resort were to pop up in place of the demolished Tropicana, that would not be publicly funded, and that would be, producing property taxes for the state and the county. So, kind of beyond the $380 million in direct support for the development of the stadium, there's also this kind of loss of revenue that comes from the property tax exemption. That is also, property taxes that the A's are benefiting from not having to pay.
And just as a real quick final note on sort of like the tax structure, right? It came up during the hearings, but all sports events in Las Vegas or Nevada are exempt from the live entertainment tax. And, over the life of this stadium, that could be tens of millions, over $100 million, right? It's not just the A's getting this. Every, Knights games, Raiders games, Formula One. It may be something that lawmakers start looking at more closely. We even saw it right during these hearings. Senator Fabian Dagnate, whose district includes the Strip, right, be very pointedly asking Dave Cavill, what about the live entertainment tax? And so, is there a willingness to get that 2/3 to do anything about it? I think is a different question from our legislators sort of publicly angry about it. But I do think that the more that Las Vegas sort of engages with these public stadium deals, the more that lawmakers may be interested in looking at that tax as a potential revenue source.
All right. Well, the next question is from Travis Vaughn, who asked about the next steps in the process and the MLB owners meeting, and saying, what is next for all of this, and when is the next MLB owners meeting?
They were meeting this week, but they're not as of now. Didn't take a vote on the move. They have till I think December, like right January 1st or something, to approve the move to Las Vegas, to approve the relocation. It could come sometime this summer. I mean, I just don't know when. I mean, when the owners meet, how often they're going to meet. That's really one of the steps you have. But there's a lot of other steps in this process. Obviously, we were talking about negotiating the CBA with the stadium authority. There's approval by the Federal Aviation Administration on the stadium. It's not going to be a height matter like you usually get with one of these hotels, but with a hotel casino, it's going to be the proximity. It's less. If you map it out, it's actually a mile or less from one of the runways, the north-south runway for Reed International Airport. So the FAA is going to weigh in. So there's still a lot of approvals that have to go through here.
The next question comes from Kyle McClinton, and he just asks, why are we having a baseball team move here instead of creating our own?
I'll just say I don't know if expansion is necessarily on the table for Major League Baseball. I think there have been some conversations about it, but relative to the NFL and the NBA, for example, Major League Baseball has been on the decline for many years. Losing viewership, losing fans. I think we've seen some recent changes to how the game is played to try to bring in that younger audience, make the games quicker and more entertaining, perhaps, depending on what you like about baseball. But, I think this is probably the more viable route, just because there isn't really a clear path to the MLB adding expansion teams.
Yeah, Sean's right there. The last time I think they expanded was the Diamondbacks or the Marlins? I can't remember. But they haven't expanded in a while. There have been one relocation, was the Montreal Expos moving to Washington, D.C. So there's talk of there's been talk of Major League expansion. Yeah, they look at it. Vegas has been mentioned, but they also look at it like Nashville, Tennessee, Portland, Oregon. The Tampa Bay Rays may move. They have a stadium issue, but they may move a little north to Orlando and stay in Florida. So, there is talk of it, but it's not, as Sean said, it's not, percolating that this is going to happen right away.
The next question is from James Harvey, and I don't know if we have an answer to this or not, but I'm going to ask it, and we'll see if we know or not. Is there any information about what happened to the Aces and the LVCCA's $80 million investment in their stadium a couple of years ago?
I think he got something. The LVCVA investment was $80 million for the naming rights of the Las Vegas ballpark for the Aviators. The Aces play at Mandalay Bay in the Michelob Ultra Arena, and there's been talk. Mark Davis, who owns the Aces, has talked about building his own arena for the team. So I think those are two different things.
All right. Well, let me move on here. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay. How does this? Oh no, I already asked that question as well. Sorry, I've lost my place here. do any individuals voting decisions surprise you? Do any of the votes from the legislators surprise you at all during this? It was a very interesting vote, right? It was not along party lines. It was kind of all over the place. Kind of surprising.
I don't know if it was surprising, but I think it was interesting the way that deal making played a role in getting this stadium deal across the finish line, right? We saw a couple of bills that the governor had vetoed, suddenly resurrected as amendments and attached to the legislation. I think, we knew that the governor called the special session, the governor supported the measure. I think that lawmakers were hesitant. I mean, earlier we talked about, why didn't we create our own team or bring up a feeder team or something like that. I mean, it's not like the lawmaker said, what Las Vegas needs is a baseball team. That is absolutely what we want right now. No, the A's came to the legislators. And I think legislators said, okay, what can we do to maybe make this deal amenable to our constituents? We saw Senator Doñate was mentioned earlier, right? He said that he voted for the deal in part because of those two amendments. We saw Senator Flores go from a no to yes, in part because both of those bills were his bills and he had brought them forward. And so I think that that's an important aspect to this that not many people may be talking about, was the legislation and deal making around that.
And I just want to add to this that this entire process is very complicated and no one legislator has a single reason why they voted yes or no on this. I think of Senator Jeff Stone, for instance, who was very favorable to the deal during that initial hearing, and then was very upset when these amendments got added, especially that second amendment resurrecting those two vetoes, saying the governor vetoed these bills. He doesn't like these bills. This isn't germane to the A's. Why are we even doing this? But when it came time to actually vote, he voted yes. And, there was a lot of that kind of stuff. I think of Senator Ira Hansen, for instance, another Republican who was a soft no before the special session started, but got so mad about the way the budget happened at the very end of the regular session that he turned into a hell no by the time the actual special started, right? So these things are complicated, and it wasn't just this, 7 or 8 day special session that led to these votes. It was the entire 120 day plus legislative session that got us here.
And when we're talking about these vetoed bills, I think it's important to know what they were. So one would have basically made it so that rail and monorail companies, monorail projects would have to comply with the state's prevailing wage law, which is really important, I think, to Democrats. And then the other amendment is requiring companies with more than 50 employees seeking tax abatements from the state to provide their employees with at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. So those were the two bills that the governor had vetoed and then resurrected for this.
And to Jacob's point about the germaneness, I think the argument from legislative counsel was, this is a bill about economic infrastructure. The special session is about economic infrastructure. These two bills kind of deal with that. I think, the one bill dealing with tax abatements and paid family leave, that won't apply to the A's because this deal does not involve tax abatements. It involves tax credits, yes, and property tax exemption, but no abatements. And then the other bill dealing with prevailing wage on monorail projects, I think one thing to watch for, the presenters of the bill said that potentially we could see the boring company Las Vegas Loop, which is an underground tunnel system where Teslas shuttle people through from location to location. They mentioned the possibility of connecting that to the stadium. And, although it might not be clear when thinking about what that project is like, technically it's a monorail project. So if they are boring a tunnel to the stadium, they're going to have to pay prevailing wage. So that does actually deal with the project in some way, or it could.
All right, we've got two more questions here before we wrap up. The next one is from Sonia S. Hi, Sonia. Can you explain the MLB's antitrust exemption and how that could affect the A's potential move to Vegas?
Well, I can explain some of the legal. So baseball is not bound by the national antitrust laws. This actually goes way back. There's Supreme Court cases about this that actually uphold the antitrust exemption. I highly recommend everyone read Flood v. Kuhn because the opinion actually talks about how cool baseball is as a game. It's pretty wild, honestly. But just generally speaking, baseball can operate as a legal monopoly, right? That's what it is when antitrust law doesn't apply. In the case of the A's, we've seen Congress people. I think Barbara Lee from California, Oakland being her district, right? She has pushed to basically say we're going to relook. Congress is going to look at that antitrust exemption, or we're going to assess a penalty to the A's for doing this because they're leaving Oakland. Will Congress do that? I think is a separate question because, I think if it's very partisan, right? I think certainly Democrats don't like antitrust exemptions on their face. I think do Republicans who control the House, right, want to even touch MLB's antitrust exemption? I think is a separate question. And it's very difficult, I think, for maybe a spurned Oakland fan base in Congress, perhaps, to say we should do this and get, like a congressman from Nebraska on board.
All right. Well, and then our last question is from Glenn Stice, who is asking about the use of natural grass in the stadium and water, the water use of the stadium in general.
Great.
I think they said they're going to use natural grass in the stadium, and it's going to be a retractable roof, glass dome, whatever. So they are going to use natural grass in it. So.
And I just wanted to note, I think that's a great question, especially when you're talking about water resources in Southern Nevada, where we do have a water shortage. I think that some of that stuff is going to have to be negotiated as the stadium gets built. I mean, right now, what we're hearing is just, even with the renderings, it's a proposal, it's a pitch of what it's going to look like. We haven't seen anything completely formalized yet. They still need to sign those community benefits agreements. We still need to kind of see how the hiring process works. There were concerns from lawmakers that, what about jobs, the longevity of those jobs, the existence of them. So I think there's still a lot of questions, not just about the construction of the facility, but how it's going to affect the community and the environment and the resources that are going toward it.
Alrighty, and with that, we're going to wrap up here, just shy of an hour-long discussion we've had. If you didn't get your question answered, I'm sorry. Tweet at us, and maybe we'll answer it. But we'll probably have a story on the website somewhere. We've got a ton of stories about this. We'll have a bunch more as we continue moving forward with this process of bringing the A's to Las Vegas. I wanted to thank Howard Stutz, Sean Galanka, Tabitha Mueller, and Jacob Solis for joining me today. And I also wanted to remind everybody that, again, we are a nonprofit. And we run off of your donations. So if you like the reporting that we're doing and you think that it's helpful, please donate to us. Go to the website, hit that big donate button, and help us keep our jobs and buy coffee and stuff like that. We appreciate it. All right, guys, thanks so much. And thank you all for watching.